It's Lou Masterson, and I was a Lieutenant JG while I was in Swift Boats and left the Navy as a lieutenant. 75 was like all of the other boats. I suppose they change over time, but it had been brought from the United States. I think it was 2 weeks before we got into Da Nang. So we had the opportunity to make it our boat. Everything was brand new. We were finding things that had not yet been opened when we'd opened certain things, instructions. I think we put the first ammunition into the ammunition lockers. I don't think we were the first ones to fire the 50 calibers of the mortars. I think the mortars, I think they had been fired already, but we outfitted the boat, if you will, for us. Now, you could do it your way. There was no opportunity to say, gee, I wish it wasn't this way, we have to change it. It wasn't. It was always your way, and had a wonderful crew that was very strong in terms of the word ownership as well. So it wasn't like, well, they didn't want to do this, or this guy didn't want to do this. We all saw it as a great opportunity. First guy I guess comes to mind is a guy named David Lambert. He was a bosun's mate. He came on board as a second-class bosun's mate, and he was the crew petty officer in charge. Became a first class when we were in Vietnam. Was the most experienced sailor in the crew. Was an exceptionally adept boat handler, which proved to be very important on any number of occasions. Was a good leader. The men all respected him. He was the kind of guy that didn't want second class. He always wanted first class operations. That meant cleanliness, that meant orderliness, that meant operation, that meant accuracy, that meant on time, everything. That was just his nature. Married man, and had at that time at least one child. I think he now has 3 children, but I've actually corresponded with him and his first son, who is now, or was at the time, over in Africa, running a boat for the United States Navy over there. Very similar to Swift boats, but obviously much more modern and much greater capabilities. The second guy was a guy named Jerry Zier, and Jerry was the engineman. He was also a second class, and he also made first class when we were in Vietnam. And he was one of these guys that if his parents had had a different background, he most likely would have gone to college, and you and I would be working for him today. He was that kind of smart, that kind of insightful, that kind of mature. But he didn't go to college. He went to high school, and there was nothing in the engine room that he couldn't do, and I mean both do himself and do better than anybody else. He was a extremely hard worker as well, which is very important on the Swift boat because, you know, there's only so many arms and legs and so many hours in the day. So if you have somebody who is wanting a cup of coffee as opposed to wanting to do his job, then I think you're going to come out on the short end of the stick. And that never happened with Jerry Zier. We had a radioman named Hickson, and he ran into some troubles in Vietnam. Unfortunately, I think that he was maybe concerned about the environment, maybe concerned about his personal safety, and did some things that caused him to be reassigned and sent back to the United States. And his replacement was a guy named Jim Jones. Important that it's Jim Jones because we got another Jones on the crew in just a second. And Jim was a third-class gunner's mate, and I've stayed in contact with him over the years. He's got a great family. He's got a couple of sons. They're both married. He has some grandchildren, and he was on a different crew because our gunner's mate had, or excuse me, our radio man had some problems, but he came on board then, Jim Jones. And he was a Southerner and had kind of a drawl about him, but again, was a little misleading in terms of the drawl. You think, well, he's kind of thinking about it. He had already thought about it, and he was ahead of you. Then we had Marlon Jones. And Marlon Jones was a seaman, and he thought that Dave Lambert walked on water. So the fact that Dave Lambert was a good guy and doing things so well, Marlon Jones wanted to be just as good a guy and do things just as well. Very quiet, but obviously the kind of guy you could count on and could count on under any set of circumstances. So those were the guys. I was the officer in charge. I think in most cases, the success that any boat has is when the crew works well together as a unit, and we did that exceptionally well. I think there was a lot of ways in which the boats in Vietnam were managed is too weak a word, or not the appropriate word, but I'll use it. Were managed, and we wanted to make sure that we were ready for anything that might happen. So the best way I think to do that is to think through those things beforehand. What if? And if you just go out and just run up and down the coast, I don't think you're going to think about those things. So we thought about those things, and we knew what we were going to do, and we kept our boat in great shape, and I think we had some good successes when we were out on patrol. The thing I'm most proud of is that my crew and I served our country to the best of our abilities, did a wonderful job doing so, and all of them came back from Vietnam.